About, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years ago, it was while, in the time that we've been doing this show, the Lyndon Johnson, the LBJ Library released a bunch of tapes that had been held for years and years, and we didn't know were there. And I was digging through them, and I discovered that in 1968, in the summer of 1968, according to these tapes, so these are tapes of Lyndon Johnson talking on the phone, LBJ had negotiated a peace in South Vietnam that was going to be announced in September or October of 68, which would have helped his vice president, Hubert Humphrey, beat Richard Nixon for president, and also would have ended the Vietnam War. And the Nixon campaign had found out about it, and John Mitchell and a few other people in the Nixon campaign operating out of New Mexico had actually contacted Madame Tu and others in the South Vietnamese government and said, we will give you a better deal. And LBJ had the CIA tape recordings of these people committing this treason. And I've been, for years on this program, I've been playing this tape for you over and over and over again, where LBJ calls up Everett Dirksen, the senior Republican in the United States Senate, and one of the probably most high integrity Republicans in my lifetime, and says, Everett, this is treason. But we can't let it get into the media. We can't let America know that Richard Nixon is committing treason to try to become president. And here is that recording.
Here's the latest information we got. The agent says that they just talked to the boss in New Mexico. And that he says that you must hold out. Just hold on until after the election. We know what Chu is saying to them out there. Yeah. We're pretty well informed on both ends. Now, I'm reading their hand, Everett. I don't want to get this in the campaign. That's right. And they oughtn't to be doing this. This is treason. I know.
And there's a whole series of conversations around this. And, we've been talking about this for years in this program, but nobody has really picked it up. And now there's more to the story. And Robert Parry, the founder and editor of Consortium News, author of America's Stolen Narrative, consortiumnews.com, has done some brilliant writing on this thing. There's some new documents coming to light, and his piece, An Insider's View of Nixon's Treason. Robert Parry, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So what's new on this story?
Well, the latest piece of new information actually comes from the Nixon library. There was an oral history that was done with Tom Houston. Now, Tom Houston was a national security aide to Richard Nixon, who was perhaps best known for his so-called Houston Plan, which was to expand spying on the anti-war movement in the late 1960s and early 1970s. But before that, at the very beginning of the Nixon administration, Nixon assigned Houston to investigate what Johnson did know about the failures of those peace talks in Paris, and basically Nixon had been informed by FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover after the election, when he was president-elect, that Johnson had these tapes that mostly were FBI tapes, actually, where there'd been taps placed on the South Vietnamese embassy and apparently on one of Nixon's operatives, Anna Chennault, and that this information had led Johnson to know that Nixon had tried to sabotage the peace talks. So Houston was assigned essentially to try to reconstruct what the Johnson people knew.
Yeah, it actually, Robert, it goes a step beyond that, because from the Johnson library, LBJ is begging Everett Dirksen to do something. Dirksen calls him back and says, I talked to Nixon. He's going to call you. And Nixon calls LBJ.
Call, right? Yes, Nixon did call. Yes,
and says, I'm not doing this.
Right. Nixon denied. There was a subsequent call to the one as you played from Dirksen, where it's a remarkable conversation where Nixon is talking to Johnson, trying to convince Johnson that he's innocent. Johnson's playing it very close to the vest, but making it clear that he has information. But Nixon doesn't learn the details of Johnson's knowledge until Hoover informs him after the election, and then so Nixon becomes concerned, obviously, as to what has happened.
Is this what they were looking for at Watergate?
Well, it's a good question. Basically, what we now know is that, and there's also I also found at the LBJ Library a couple of years ago, which is part of the book America's Stolen Narrative, this file. There was an actual file which Johnson did not include in the official material that was taken after his presidency to the library. He entrusted it to Walt Rostow, his national security advisor, apparently to keep it out of the hands of Nixon. And so what that file contained the top secret wiretaps of what they knew about Nixon's operation, and it was quite detailed.
Whoa.
And Johnson had Rostow take it and hold it until after Johnson's death, and it was then eventually turned over to the Johnson Library, and 20 years later or so they began declassifying parts of it. So we now have it, and it does show a remarkable amount of information that the Johnson folks had as to how Nixon did it, why he did it, who the players were in it. There was still some uncertainty that the Johnson people had, but the point of the new material from Houston is that Nixon was trying to locate what the Johnson folks had, where it was, and this leads ultimately to that remarkable conversation from the Nixon tapes on June 17th of 1971. It was after the Pentagon Papers had begun to come out. Nixon knew something the rest of us didn't, that there was a sequel to the Pentagon Papers. The Pentagon Papers end about 1967. What Nixon was afraid of is that there would be another disclosure from these other documents that were missing. They couldn't find them. That would reveal that Nixon had engaged in this, what Johnson called treason. And obviously that would have had a huge impact potentially on Nixon's political future.
Right.
In 1971, there was a very angry anti-war movement out there. Nixon certainly would have faced demands for impeachment possibly, or certainly would have endangered his reelection in 1972. So he sets up, at that point, the plumbers. And he orders them to break into Brookings because he believes that these documents might be hidden in the Brookings safe.
And Brookings is where the Pentagon Papers had come out of.
Well, not really, but
okay.
they were from the Rand Corporation.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, thank you.
But Nixon thought this file, because Houston had told him he believed that this file might be in the safe at Brookings. Nixon then puts together this team under E. Howard Hunt to go break into Brookings. The break-in apparently failed, but the team was set up, and it became the plumber unit that broke into Watergate a year later.
Right. Amazing. So we have just a minute. Robert Parry left, consortiumnews.com. Robert, we know that now also that Bonnie Sauter wrote last year in the Christian Science Monitor, the president of Iran, that they had cut a deal with the Reagan campaign to hold the hostages. So Reagan was not a legitimate president. He screwed Jimmy Carter by committing treason. Bush was not a legitimate president. Supreme Court gave him the presidency. Nixon committed treason. Has there been a legitimate Republican president since Dwight Eisenhower?
Well, obviously, the question you have to sort of ask, I suppose, is whether, for instance, say George H.W. Bush would have been in a position to win in '88 if it hadn't been for his being part of the Reagan administration.
Right.
And clearly, Reagan won overwhelmingly in '84. But certainly, this is part of now the Republican DNA there to use these very anti-democratic tactics to achieve power. They understand the importance of power, especially controlling the U.S., and they do whatever they have to do to get it.
And this is why they do things like voter suppression.
Exactly.
Yeah. Amazing. Robert Parry, the founder and editor of Consortium News, a great news source. Consortium or consortiumnews.com, the website, at Consortium News, the Twitter, and the author of America's Stolen Narrative. Robert, you're doing great work. You're doing God's work. Thanks for being with us.
Tom.
Good talking with you. Always good talking.